Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name is Stephanie and today I'm going to be reviewing LA Colors Jelly Polishes. Let me start by saying this video is long overdue. I first saw these maybe a year ago back on Linry's channel when she picked these up and reviewed them, but I didn't pick them up myself until January of this year, and I knew I wanted to wait until like the warmer months, you know, hopefully share them around spring, but as usual it just gets delayed because there are other collections that come out and other videos that kind of take priority. And I'm mentioning this to say that two of the colors I think are now discontinued, unfortunately, so I just waited a little too long to share these and I'm so sorry about that. But I hope you don't mind still seeing them in my review here. I just figured it would be helpful just in case you happen to come across them, because LA Colors are available online and also at Walmart, so you might be lucky. I just personally never found them in Walmart, so I ordered these online, but like I mentioned, two of the colors, the green and the brown specifically, are not on the website anymore. I will say more of my thoughts for the end after some comparisons. For now, let's just get into the swatches.
The first shade in the collection is called Heat Wave, and I would describe this as a very bright hot pink jelly. This one was by far the most pigmented out of the others in the collection, so on the first coat alone you get really great color payoff. It is even for the most part, obviously just a little bit sheer because, as expected, it is a jelly, but it does build up really beautifully in two coats. It definitely looks a lot more even coverage, and again, it is just so saturated and juicy. I feel like just the second coat alone really intensifies the color so much more, where it makes little difference if you wanted to add a third coat, whereas with the other polishes, a third coat really does affect the color. Next up we have Illusion, and I think I would describe this as an orchid pinky purple kind of shade. And as you can see here on the first coat, this is far more sheer, more of that translucent, squishy jelly kind of feel. The formula overall on these were really nice, where I didn't find them to be super thin and watery, though with a lot of jellies you can experience pooling if you just have too much polish on your nail, but it just felt relatively easy to work with. It just was a little finicky maybe to apply because of the brush. I think these LA Color brushes are just a little too dense. If they were the normal paddle brushes, I would like them so much more. The color on this was cute though. The next pink we have is Rosewater, which is a much lighter, I think warm-toned shade of pink. And as you can see here, it is very, very sheer, where the first coat is just kind of giving nothing, or maybe like a Your Nails but better sort of wash of color. Definitely very subtle, which, you know, maybe not be for everybody, but I think it could work as a base for negative space nail art or French tips. But it does build up in that beautiful light pink color when you do two or especially three coats. And the last pink we have is called Mirage, which is more of a peachy, corally kind of pink. This one is definitely the most similar to the last shade in terms of color and pigmentation, where again, the first coat is just giving a subtle wash of color, but this one is even warmer than the last shade, again, almost pushing it into like the coral territory, but not quite. And as expected, it builds up really beautifully in two or three coats, depending on your preference. I definitely think for jellies, they look really cute in two coats, but three really gives you more of that color. Next up we have Green Tea, and this is a mid-toned green jelly. This one had another really smooth, fluid kind of formula. I feel like it self-leveled pretty well for the most part. It maybe isn't the most even. It also is very sheer, which I find is usually the case with these sort of darker colored jellies. They end up looking very, very glassy. They're not usually milky, so even on three coats you can see straight through to my nail line. This is unfortunately unfortunately one of the shades that is no longer available on the website. I'm not sure if you can find it in stores at this point anymore. It's not a bad polish, but this is one of my least favorite shades of green. I would have preferred it if it was a lot lighter, more like a lime color. Next up we have Wispy Blue, which I would kind of describe as a blue raspberry sort of color. It might look super dark in the bottle, almost like a cobalt shade, but again, similar to the last polish, I usually find that the darker colored jellies end up applying really sheer on the nail and they just look much lighter than what you would expect. So on the first coat you saw it gave a subtle wash of blue color. On 2 coats it does even out and build up in color a little bit more, but it's still incredibly sheer. So this is definitely one of those jellies that no matter how many coats you do, it can intensify the color, but it will not cover up your nail line. Next up we have Oasis, which I think I would just describe as a blurple kind of jelly, maybe indigo, depending on how many coats you do, but hopefully you can tell from the brush and the stem of the bottle that it kind of looks very like cobalt blue almost, but then it applies more purple. Granted, my nails are a little bit stained, but I do think this is one of those shades that just toes the line between blue and purple. Either way, it is really pretty. It has the same kind of formula as the last couple of jellies where it's very sheer on the first coat and the subsequent coats, more of that true glassy see-through kind of jelly look. I did accidentally go with like too thick of a third coat though, so you can start to see some of the pooling near the sides and tip of my nail. And the last jelly that we have is Ghosted, which unfortunately is the other one that is not available on the website anymore. This one I would describe as a very warm toned brown shade. It just looks brown in the bottle, but then applying it on the nail, you really see that reddish undertone coming through. And I thought it was really pretty. I love just these shades of reddish brown. The formula on this, again, was similar to the other shades. I didn't find it as self-leveling though, but I think it evened out the most on 3 coats. It's such a shame they retired this one because I think it's just so flattering. Though I am confused by the name, I feel like Ghosted would have worked better if it was white, black, or gray. And here's a little thumb swatch collage of the jellies. I'm showing 2 coats here and I will show 3 coats in a second, but I really just wanted to show them all together, mainly for the 2 pinks, Rosewater and Mirage. Those 2 are definitely the closest in terms of value, where, you know, maybe you don't need both, but it's nice having the option if you want like a more neutral-ish pink like Rosewater or one that's a little bit warmer, more coral leaning like Mirage. Either way, I think they all look the best in 3 coats, maybe with the exception of Heatwave, because again, that one was just so pigmented. For comparisons, I wanted to quickly show Cirque's Poppy Jelly next to Heatwave. That one's like a reddish orange kind of color, so it's just for color reference. When it comes to hot pink jellies, I obviously have to compare it to Cirque's XOXO, ILNP's Malibu, and Crack's Back to the Fuchsia. So I started with 2 coats of each here, and you can already see just how pigmented and saturated Heatwave is. I think it's a bit warmer toned than the other shades too. It's the most similar to Cirque's XOXO, especially once you do 3 coats of each. To me, they both look to have that like reddish undertone of a hot pink, but even still, Heatwave is just a few shades darker. Next, for Illusion, I was immediately reminded of a couple of purple jellies from Cirque. These 2 here are Berry and Pitaya. Between these, I do think Pitaya is the closest, being like a little bit more vibrant and almost pink leaning. And for the pink jellies that lean a little bit purple, I pulled out Rosewater and Pink Lady Jelly, both of which are cool toned pinks, but I do think Pink Lady is a little bit closer than Rosewater is, so I decided to compare that one along with Pitaya, and I combined both of them to sort of recreate Illusion, which was kind of close but not exact. I think Illusion is slightly more pink leaning. Next, for Rosewater, when it comes to warm-toned Cirque pinks, I have Lolly Jelly from the most recent Glaze collection and Guayaba Jelly originally from the Jarritos collab. I'm sure you can tell right away that that one is closer than Lolly Jelly is because Lolly is just too dark and too hot, but Guayaba is still too warm to match Rosewater. So then I thought to also compare it next to Cirque's Rosewater Jelly, which is much closer in terms of value. Like, surprisingly, they kind of look the same on the nail, but the biggest difference is the temperature, where Cirque's Rosewater is just much cooler toned. So to add a little bit more of that warmth, I thought maybe I could layer Guayaba over Rosewater, and I feel like this is pretty close. Next for Mirage, I knew I had to see this next to Cirque's Guayaba Jelly and ILNP's Pink Slush, both of which are warm tone jellies that have a little bit of that corally undertone. And I am so pleased to report that Mirage is an exact dupe for Cirque's Guayaba Jelly. Pink Slush is definitely very close as well, but it is just a few shades darker. Next for green tea, the other green jellies I have are Cirque's Kelly Jelly, Toronja Jelly, and Cracked Polish's No Shrubs. Of these, Toronja is the closest, but it's a little bit too deeper or saturated. Moving on to Wispy Blue, I wanted to quickly show it next to ILNP's Turquoise Water, which as you can see is a much lighter turquoisey blue. For my Cirque blues, I initially pulled out Indigo Jelly, Cobalt Jelly, and Navy Jelly on the right, but hopefully you can tell that Navy Jelly is far more desaturated compared to the others two, so I ended up swapping that one out with Curaçao Jelly from the most recent Glaze collection, and I do think that one is kind of the closest to Wispy Blue. It's the most similar in terms of value, but it's just a little bit more turquoise. Maybe Wispy Blue is kind of the in-between of Curaçao and Cobalt. Next for Oasis, I first pulled out Cirque's Eros and Royal Jelly, which are the dark purples, but as you can see, those are much more warm toned. So I also put on Indigo Jelly on my pinky, which is more blue. Then I thought to try to layer some of these polishes to recreate Oasis, but they were all just a little too dark. But I noticed that Blurple Jelly kind of had the closest color to Oasis, so I decided to swatch that on its own on my pointer, as well as layering it over a couple of other blues to try and recreate the dark blurple color of Oasis, but I don't think I was successful with this. And lastly for Ghosted, I pulled out Cirque's Mxcn Cola Jelly and Cracked Polish's Chinotto, which are just kind of these warm reddish brown kind of shades. Mahogany Jelly is a warm toned brown, but definitely more brown than red. So I ended up swapping that one out for Marsala Jelly, which I think was a little bit closer in terms of value, but again, it's just like a little too light or rosy colored and not brown enough.
So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for LA Colors jellies. As always, I would love to know what you think of these polishes, if you had grabbed them yourself after seeing Linri's review, because I was so excited to see them. I mean, you guys know I love jelly polishes and we just don't have enough of them on the market. Cirque really is the brand that is dominating them. There are other brands like Starly and ILNP that like have introduced jellies. Even Cracked Polish is doing like a jelly of the month shade, but I feel like they're always just like so few and far between. And honestly, this collection is kind of similar to that because it seems like this is the only like plain jelly collection we've gotten from LA Colors, at least that I've seen. And this lineup, you know, is nice. Like I like the colors, but it's not super varied. You know, we have 4 pinks, which sure have a little nuance between, you know, some of them being darker or warm toned versus cool toned. I would have loved if we just had like a pure red jelly, an orange, a yellow, you know, just like other colors that are missing from the rainbow lineup. And considering they already like discontinued the green and the brown, I'm not sure if we're gonna get any more. It would have been so nice though, because again, LA Colors is just so affordable. I think they retail for like a little over $1 or just under $2 if you buy them at Walmart directly. But I ordered these online from the LA Colors website back in January. They retail for $3.50, but there was like a 25% off sale. So everything came out to maybe like $40, including free shipping. So it just like really worked out for me. But even if you pay like the $3.50 price tag on these, it is just so much more affordable than other jellies on the market, namely Cirque, because they retail for like $12.50, so almost like $10 more. And I didn't realize this before, but LA Colors is actually slightly bigger than Cirque. These are 13 milliliter bottles, while Cirque is 11. I don't know why, I just like kind of assumed LA Colors was like a smaller size bottle. probably because the bottle and the brush are so like short and stout. So I kind of figured they were just like a little bit smaller, but yeah, they are actually a little bit larger than Cirque and several dollars cheaper. And thankfully I feel like they are close enough in color, if not exact dupes, to some of Cirque's jellies. So if you've been holding off on those, you know, these are a really great alternative. So anyway, make sure to let me know any and all thoughts that you have down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!